that. Good morning. Happy Wednesday, March 1st. March 1st, 30 days left in the first quarter. Today we're going to talk about, we haven't had a contract class in a while where like a contracts Friday, just because we've been doing the mastermind. We've had a lot of changes in the way that things are happening. A lot of things still saying the same. We're going to talk about some contract issues. We're going to talk about strategies with some of the offers now for your buyers. What's working, what doesn't seem to be working as well, what's happening, what buyers are getting, what they're not getting. We're going to talk about contracts today. We're going to talk about some of the addenda. We're going to talk about just different things like that. So that's going to be our topics for today. That's what we're going to be covering. I'm going to jump in and start off with a few. Get out of here. I want to start off with a few quotes just to start getting our mind thinking and start shifting some attitudes here. So a couple quotes for you. It's not the snake bite that kills you. It's the venom that continues to flow through you. It's not the snake bite that kills you. It's the venom that flows through you. How does that relate to us? It's not what happens to you in life. It's how you react to what happens to you. Something happens to you, something really bad happens to you, and you just sit there, kind of like a snake bite. The venom that continues to course through your body is what's eventually going to kill you, not the actual bite. The event that happened to you is what is not what's going to kill you or what's going to drag you down or make you depressed. It's how you react to the event that happens to you. So just keep that in mind. It's all about what happens to you. It's not what happens to you. It's how you react to what happens to you. We typically only weigh out the costs and benefits of doing something, but we should also be weighing out the costs and benefits of not doing it as well. So our mastermind, the costs and benefits of making our contacts, the costs of you making those contacts, the benefits of you making those contacts. But what if you don't do it? I would challenge each of you who have committed to making these contacts through the mastermind and getting the additional contacts and creating the additional action items through your pipeline. What would have happened if you didn't do that over the last 60 days? Think about that. For those of you that have generated contracts, generated opportunities, put people in your pipeline, have been able to create some more business, what would have happened if you didn't do that? We have to start looking at the costs of not doing things as well as the cost of actually the benefits of doing them. Here's another one. Being held accountable may feel like an attack if you're not ready to acknowledge how poor your decisions have been and how they have impacted you and others. Being held accountable might feel like an attack if you're not ready to acknowledge how poor your decisions have been. And that's why we typically on our accountability days for the mastermind, sometimes, not always, but sometimes those numbers will fall off because the people aren't willing to take accountability, take responsibility for the actions that they've taken. And it feels like an attack when we're coming to you, trying to ask you to share some of the things you've done. You immediately feel attacked for what you didn't do. All I want to know is what you did do and what you're proud of for doing. How did you show up this week? Not what you didn't do. So don't take those as attacks. We're not trying to attack you. We are trying to ask you, well, tell me something awesome about what you did. I just want to know where the results are. And let's hear the great things that did happen. There's one. Crushing is a stage, not a destination. Too often when something happens to us, like this crushing feeling, this upset feeling, depressed feeling, challenge feeling, we make it a destination and we feel like we're stuck and we feel like we can't get out of it. Just remember, crushing is a stage, not a destination. A grape is perfectly fine as a grape. There's nothing wrong with a grape. The grape can be consumed and eaten. It can be cooked with. It can be added to things. You can make a salad out of it. You can make a fruit salad out of it. It can be an accompaniment. It can be eaten just solely alone. There's nothing wrong with a grape. But in order to reach its best and highest use, to be able to be savored and stored and enjoyed for long periods of time, it has to be crushed first. So that crushing is a stage of the grape's life that ultimately extends it and gives it more value, because wine is more expensive than grapes. So just keep that in mind, that the crushing is a stage, not a destination. Breakdowns happen right before breakthroughs. When you are ready to multiply, you must first be divided. Another one, good seed, good soil. Really simple one, good seed, good soil. You can have the best seed in the world, but if you don't surround it with good soil, with nutrients and all of the things that it needs, and then water it, that seed will not turn into what it's meant to be. A seed can sit on a shelf. It can sit in, and we see those seed packets. They sit in seed packets for years, never actually grow until you put it around good soil, and then you nourish it. So good seed, good soil. You were given a fingerprint that no one else has, so that you may leave an impression that no one else can. Each and every single one of you has a fingerprint that is distinct to you. And I would ask you to look a little bit deeper into yourself, because the fingerprint is just on the surface, but the impression comes from who you are as an individual, as a being, from your emotions, from your actions, from your energy, from your intentions. That's the impression that's left. The fingerprint is just on the surface. So you were given that fingerprint, and no one else has that same fingerprint. No one else has that same energy, intention, emotion, and ability to impact others the way that you do. No one else has that, because you are completely and utterly individual in your own mind, in your own way. And that you have the ability to leave an impression that no one else can. So you need to start showing up as that version of you, so that you can continue to leave that impression. You can have more than you've got, because you can become more than you are. All you have to do is show up as a little bit more than who you were yesterday, and you will get a little bit more than what you got the day before. But the awesome part is, if you continue to show up with a little bit more today and a little more tomorrow, compounding starts to occur. Compounding doesn't just happen, compounding interest in funds whenever you invest money. It happens with your actions and your intentions and your emotions. The more you compound these actions day over day over day, you start compounding them, and you start seeing the greater effect of you at your best capability. I love this one recently. Fear is the frustration of wanting to have a predictable outcome around an experience you haven't had before. That one resonates. I love that one. That one's awesome. Think about it. Fear is frustration because you can't predict the outcome, and you want to, because you've never had this experience before. So you get fearful of your inability to predict what the outcome is, creating those anxieties and eventually sometimes analysis paralysis. So those are just some quotes to think about today. Now we're going to jump in. We're going to start up. We're going to go and we're going to talk about contracts. We're going to talk about contract concerns, some of the issues that we've been seeing, and just kind of go through some of these so that we can be stronger. We can be more powerful with our ability to represent our buyers and our sellers, because this is going to come from both ends. So if you have any contract concerns, issues, questions about offers, negotiations, please chat them in through this morning, and we will address those. We'll talk about those as we continue on. But I'm going to start off with some topics here, and then we'll get into a few others. So verbal offers. Let's tell you, here's the scenario that's going on right now, and it's continuing ongoing. We have a listing, and there is an agent who is basically trying to verbally negotiate terms of the contract and things to be done prior to ever submitting an offer, not just price. He's basically calling our agent and saying, well, I see that the roof has been done, the AC has been done, this has been done, and we want to make sure that all of the permits and everything are done correctly. I need you to send me all of the permits, all of the receipts for the work, and I want your seller to attest that they have done everything correctly, everything perfectly, the way that it's been done, the way that everything's been done properly through the county and through the contractor and through, I want them to attest to that. And then I want them to agree to fix any problems that come up from it. And I want them, all of this in an email saying, I want you to this, I want you to this, I want you to this. So we provided them with the permits. Here are the permits for all the work that's been done. They're in the county, they're accessible, you can find them. Here's all the permits. Nope, not good enough. Well, it looks like I don't know if those were done correctly. And I'm not sure if that, so I need your seller to attest to, we'll send you an offer the minute your seller attests to being willing to close out all the permits if there's any open ones or expired, obtain permits for unpermitted work, and do everything correctly if there's any issues. That's what we're getting in an email prior to an offer. And no dude submitted an offer and do inspections. Exactly. I received an offer via text yesterday, including proof of funds. Exactly. It's crazy. So when we're talking about that, look, we're all for certified pre-loved homes, disclosing everything up front, but there's multiple things that already cover exactly what's going on here that you would have all of the protections lined up. Number one, we attach a seller's property disclosure to the listing. In the seller's property disclosure, it talks about the age of the roof. We had that filled in. The roof was just done in 2021. There's no obligation to attach the permits to the listing, but the permits were pulled and the permits were done. You can find them in the county. There's also a section for unpermitted work. The seller says there's been no unpermitted work because they are not aware of unpermitted work. There's also a contract that many of you don't know about. It's called the residential contract with repair limits. And there's a whole section in that residential contract with repair limits that addresses permits. You can assign a dollar amount or a percentage of the purchase price to make sure that everything that this agent was talking about putting in this email, and this has been a 2-day back and forth phone calls, mansplaining and agent splaining exactly why I've been doing this forever. And this is how this is, do you not know how this works and how these are supposed to, it's completely unacceptable. And we have a contract that would address all of the issues that he's saying and would obligate the seller to do everything that they're asking in email. Yet this agent doesn't understand that he's negotiating all of those terms and trying to get the seller to agree to something that he could put into a contract and hold his buyer accountable and hold the seller accountable. And I guarantee if they did put an offer together, they would submit an as-is contract, because he obviously doesn't know that there's a section in our residential contract that covers all of that. He would submit an as-is contract and try to write all of that in additional terms. And then this is where I want you to be powerful enough and strong enough to stand up and say, Mr. Seller, you've got a great home here. You've taken care of this home. Let's counter this on a residential contract with repair limits, because this is what it's going to do. He's telling you he wants you to show him you're serious about doing all of these things, and you know that you are. I want you to tell him, I want to see that you're serious, Mr. Buyer. Put your money where your mouth is and be obligated to this contract. Put the repair limits in for, well, I'll counter back with repair limits at say $1,000. I'll counter back with WDO at $500 or $1,000, and I'll counter back with the permit section at $500 or $1,000. We have all the permits. We've provided them with all of the permits and shown them, here's all the permits. And if we counter back, look, I know there's no unpermitted work because I can see here, 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 and here. We actually have a 4-point that says the plumbing is original and it's PVC. The roof was done in 2021. The AC was done in 20. The electric panel is the way that it is. We have all of that. It's already been provided, yet this agent is still verbally negotiating things prior to, with information that he already has, trying to get the seller to attest to something that he doesn't need to attest to, because everything's covered by the contract. If we just stopped for 1 second and tried to represent our clients the correct way, instead of just being right or proving our value or proving that you have been in the business for 20 years or however long you've been in the business for. So silly agent tricks that are happening. Yeah, when you explain a regular FAR bar, you might as well be speaking Swahili. Exactly. So when you have permit concerns, yes, we all want to know if I have a buyer and I want my buyer to be protected the most that I can. Yes. And as this contract will probably give the buyer the most protection, because the buyer, in their sole discretion, they could do whatever they want. They don't have to do an inspection. They don't have to like the weather that day, the color of your shirt. It doesn't matter. They can cancel that contract. But if we're trying to provide value and write contracts that stick and hold people accountable, because the buyer said that this was the home out of the 20 that we saw, that this is the one that they wanted, and the seller has it on the market saying that I know of no unpermitted work and these are the things that I have, then if we write a residential contract with repair limits, it'll cover all of those things. The permit section in the residential contract with repair limits covers all of that. Let's pull that up and just show that really quickly. Residential contract for sale and purchase, FAR bar 6. In the costs to be paid by the seller section, dollar amount or 1.5% if left blank for costs associated with closing out open or expired building permits or obtaining required building permits for any existing improvement for which a permit was not obtained. This is where you have to, as a listing agent, you have to be very careful and knowledgeable of what the seller is attesting to in their seller's property disclosure and have discussions with them. The seller checked the box. He knows of no unpermitted work. Nothing wrong with that. If he doesn't know of any unpermitted work, he's going to attest to that. He should attest to, I don't know of any unpermitted work. If he's done unpermitted work, he should not say that, obviously. But if unpermitted work was done prior to him buying the home and he has no knowledge whether it was permitted or unpermitted, he can say no to that question. I don't know if this is his knowledge. I have no knowledge of any unpermitted work. But you have to be careful because he's only attesting to what he knows. There might be something in that property that was unpermitted. And if there is something in that property that was unpermitted, your seller, even though it wasn't his doing of doing the unpermitted work, will be responsible for repairing and fixing it. So that's the one thing that you have to be careful with this contract for the permit section of this contract. More calls came in and I kept it short, put it on the standard residential contract and send it over, or don't. Exactly. That's unfortunately, that's how you have to get with them. Sometimes we want to get an offer, but we need to get it in writing. So what I asked the agent to do is I said, look, let's try to do what we can to get this offer. But at the same time, we need to get the offer in writing. So I said, this agent actually used to work with us. So I said, why don't you do this, since he's trying to take control and he's being very pushy and very, he's doing the agent explaining thing and do not know how this works. I said, well, so I just said this. I said, look, hey, seeing that you used to work for Beggins Enterprises, I'm sure that you're aware or still remember that we are very fond of the residential contract with repair limits, which would cover all of the concerns that your buyer has under the permit section. You're also aware that working for Beggins Enterprises in the past, our listing agreement expressly states that we are not to present verbal offers to the seller. The seller has directed me, do not present verbal offers. So whereas I understand that you have some concerns and thoughts, this will not be presented to the seller as it is verbal offers, and it is required to put it in writing for me to present it to the seller. Once presented to the seller, I'll get you a timely response. So I said, just be very curt, very short, and just put it straight like that. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, smack him in the face a little bit, since he's trying to do all the smacking. Sometimes you have, don't roll over for things. You don't have to be rude, but just come right back and say very firmly, no, here's the deal. You know that we don't present verbal offers, put it in writing, and you know that the residential contract will cover all of those issues, or you don't know. I'm not sure, but now you do know. And this whole section talks about closing out building permits. This talks about the timelines and everything that's supposed to happen. So it's covered. All of this is covered. Every issue that they have is covered by a contract. And that's the whole point of having an inspection period and a contract with terms. We have 12 pages of legally binding verbiage, because at some point, sometime, someone did exactly what this agent is doing. And it came to the attention of attorneys and the Florida Association of Realtors and said, hey, maybe we should put that in the contract. Ta-da! We did that it's done for a reason. So use the terms and use the contract that's there. Don't try to go outside of the box and start doing all this crazy stuff. All right, so we've got a deal, and we've got a deal that's going on, and just kind of covering real life scenario. We have a listing on the market. Buyer comes in, the listing's been on the market for a little while. Buyer comes in with a cash offer. They present a cash offer. It's an offer the seller is willing to accept. They have proof of funds. There's an LLC. That is the proof of funds. We verify that the buyer's name on the contract is from the LLC. We verify how the funds are coming. They are access to the funds. The funds are going to be able to be transferred and delivered. We verified with the agent, verified with tax account. Everything is good to go. We go under contract. We get a week before closing and funds are not available. Apparently, the LLC has other members. It's a pool of people together of funds and can't release the funds until something else has been established, which was not disclosed to us. We got an offer near the end of December, beginning of January. We find out the LLC that was needing to be established for things to be transferred to was opened up the beginning of December. So the buyer knew they had to take certain steps and knew that it wasn't done yet, submitted an offer to us, knowing that there might be delays, but didn't disclose any of this. So we get to close to closing, and they're not able to get the funds. The funds aren't able to be released. It's just a whole mess of things. We're trying to get clarity on what that is. But in the meantime, we have a seller who has moved out of the house, is renting another house temporarily, short term, 6 to 8 months, because they're building a new house. They're building their new house and they've got $30,000 tied up with the builder. And they're supposed to deliver another deposit at the end of February when this one closed. And they couldn't do that. They stand to lose that contract, and this buyer can't close because they can't have access to the funds. So what do we do? There's not much you can do if they can't get the funds, but this was a cash contract. The buyer was fully outside of all of their protections. Our seller is incurring 2 times mortgages, rent, 2 times bills, and everything now, and will be for another at least month. There's a $10,000 escrow. So what do? We were able to agree to extend the contract because we were made to feel comfortable enough that the buyer had everything in the works and was going to, but it's just delayed. So the buyer, being outside of all of their protections, their $10,000 is at risk right now. The buyer agreed to send another $5,000 escrow deposit and release that to the seller immediately to get the seller made whole for the costs that they're incurring over this next 30 days. So we got them to release the escrow deposit that they just sent in. We still have escrow in the account, but they released the stuff they just sent in. So the seller was made whole. Get a couple weeks later, buyer's still not done. Still doesn't have the funds, still can't get them yet, but everybody does feel confident it's going to happen. Right up until the day we're supposed to close, the buyer says, hey, everything is good, but I just can't close today. Here's all the documentation. Everything's going to be released. Everything is in order. We're going to get the funds. Here's this. Gave us enough proof that made us feel comfortable and confident that they would be able to close. So now what do? Now we have to extend another period of time, and the seller's going to be out more money. So our agent, being a very strong agent, stood up and said, hey, the seller agreed to sell to you at the price they agreed to sell to you at. They are going to be incurring at least $5,000 or $6,000 more in costs because of the way that you handled this. We can't just release more money to them. We need to raise the price. They need to be made whole. They agreed to sell by this date at this price. Now they're going to have to pay $5,000 or $6,000 more, which means in essence, your offer is $5,000 or $6,000 less, because that's the amount of money less they will put in their pocket. So we got them to raise the price by $6,000. And in addition to that, because all of the protections were gone and they already released $5,000, there's still $10,000 in escrow. We got them to release the $10,000 that was still in escrow to the seller immediately to help with some more of the costs that they would be incurring. And they also delivered another $5,000 into escrow. So there is money in escrow still. My question to you is, how many of you would be strong enough to be able to stand up and have that foresight to say, hey, the seller's incurring this much more cost. We need to raise the price by $6,000, and the $10,000 that's already there, it's already gone. You already lost it. You have no more protection. Give that to the seller too. So now the seller has $15,000 prior to, that's going to help with all of their costs and help them make a deposit on their new home so that they can hold the builder over and not lose that and not be damaged anymore. We got them to agree to all of those things. They released all of the funds. And how serious is a buyer who is now $15,000 invested into this home? All it was an escrow before. Now it's gone. $15,000 now invested into this home. How serious is the buyer? Is that a good buyer? Is that a buyer you would feel confident in moving forward with? I would say yes. So those are the things that start to make me feel, okay, there's no way this is a scam. This scammer has nothing to gain if they were a scammer, nothing to gain after they just gave me 15 grand. They're definitely not going to make 15 grand up with whatever scam they're trying to pull if they were. So I know that that's not the case. We've been able to talk to, verify, and vet all of the information that we've been given, and they're going to give us this money. That's a good opportunity. Let's do that. We have another one, similar kind of scenario. That's a finance deal. The day before closing, the lender calls and says, this isn't going to get done. But we have an answer for it. Apparently what happened was closing was supposed to be today or yesterday. On Friday, the lender says, everything's good. We're good to go. Got everything set. I have one last thing, which is the verbal verification of employment. I just need to call their employer, verify everything is still good to go, and we'll be solid. Come Monday or Tuesday, we have a problem. Didn't say exactly what it was. The assumption is the verification of employment didn't verify that the employment funds pay was hours were the same as they were when they first went under contract or first got their file in with the underwriter. They need a co-borrower. Lucky for them, they have one. So what do you do? Hey, I know it's the day before closing. I can't close. I can't get approved, but I have a borrower that I can put on this loan that will get me closed. What do you do? Yeah, sure. Let's extend it. Let's do that. What should we do? So we call the lender and we say, Mr. Lender, I'm going to need a new approval, pre-approval, something in writing from you that states that you have verified this co-borrower's information and that they are a good co-borrower. That being with this borrower and the co-borrower, that they will be able to get this loan done. And how long are you going to need to do it? Because that's how long we're going to extend it. We're not going to give you any more, any less. And what are you going to need from us? So we went through all of that, talked with them, and then had the ask the buyer again, we will give you this extension, but your loan approval period has passed. I'm happy to give you a chance to still buy this home and keep you under contract. I'm happy to do that. I want you to get this home. You're the best buyer for us, but there's got to be something in it for me. So since all of your protection in your contract has lapsed and is gone, and your $2,500 in escrow is in essence at risk, I'm going to ask you to release that escrow to me immediately, and I will give you a 2-week extension. That's what your lender said you needed. He told me that everything was good with his borrower. That's what we're willing to do. And everybody said yes. That's a serious borrower who's willing to release their funds and be willing to go get a co-borrower and put them on. So one thing to think about verbiage when you're putting this in there, most people, when they're putting something in, I want the escrow non-refundable, we'll just make it non-refundable. You can have a contract, you can have $2,500 in escrow, and hey, your protection is gone. Oh, good, we'll just make it non-refundable. Just write an addendum. Escrow deposit is now deemed non-refundable. What's the problem with that? When escrow is deemed non-refundable, it just means it's non-refundable. It doesn't mean anybody gets the money. It just says it's non-refundable. In order for the title company to actually give it to somebody, whether it's a refund to the buyer or releasing it to the seller, the title company has to be told to do that. And telling them that, oh, it's non-refundable is not enough. That's not telling them specifically what they're supposed to do with those funds. It just says it's non-refundable. Okay, well, it's non-refundable to who? To the buyer? Okay, so the buyer doesn't get it back. So who gets it? The seller. It doesn't say that. It just says we don't give it back to the buyer. It doesn't say who's supposed to get it. So you actually have to add verbiage to the contract. And this is verbiage that came from Jim Holloway at Paramount Title when we had these issues before. He says, you're supposed to write in there, the title company needs to be told what to do. Buyer and seller hereby direct Paramount Title to release the $2,500 escrow to the seller immediately. The $2,500 shall be credited towards the purchase price at closing. Should the buyer fail to close, the $2,500 shall be non-refundable. He said, you want to release it to the seller immediately and also tell us that it is non-refundable and the buyer's not getting it back. So the buyer can't go and fight for, well, there was this other term in the contract that said I should have got my money back. The seller needs to give it back. We're making it non-refundable as well. But that's a verbiage that you would put in to an addendum to release the escrow to the seller now. And I will give you an extension to whenever. And this is the verbiage you would put in. All right. Next, what are some of the other financing? So we had this, our financing contingency. We had this come up. We have a seller. The buyer was not from our buyer was not one of ours. Financing loan approval period was coming due. The appraisal was not completed yet, but the financing and loan approval period was beginning to come to an end. The buyer expressed multiple times in conversation that he goes, well, I mean, we're good. We're just waiting on the appraisal. And, you know, because of the contract, their appraisal, they'll still be fine, even if the appraisal doesn't get back in time. Incorrect. The previous contract that we had can we add that as verbiage, drop down in dot loop? Yeah, we can talk about that and figure that out. The previous contract we had was in this section, line 126 to 131. The last version of it said, if a buyer has timely provided either written notice provided for in the paragraph 8B above, and buyer thereafter fails to close, the deposit shall be paid to seller unless failure to close is for one of two reasons. It was one of three reasons in the previous contract. First reason is the seller defaults. Second reason is property related conditions of loan approval, meaning specifically excluding the appraisal valuation, specifically excluding the appraisal valuation. So they specifically exclude and say the appraisal does not count as one of those reasons. The last contract, the last version had a number 3, and it said the appraisal obtained by the buyer's lender is insufficient to meet the terms of the loan approval. meaning the valuation of the appraisal did not come back at the value for their loan approval. Property did not appraise. That's what the previous contract says. But now, not only does it say right here, the property related conditions of loan approval, specifically excluding the appraisal. So they're saying the appraisal valuation doesn't matter for that reason. But they also have this section here, they added to the financing contingency. Buyer's going to obtain a loan, this type of loan, for a fixed rate at an or adjustable rate at this loan amount with an initial interest or the prevailing rate, and for a term of blank years. And number two, buyer's mortgage broker or lender having received an appraisal or alternative valuation of the property satisfactory to the lender, which is sufficient to meet the terms required for lender to provide financing for buyer and proceed to closing. Appraisal. It specifically says here, that the appraisal needs to be done within the timeline of the loan approval. Needs to be done, and it needs to be received by the lender. So keep that in mind. The previous contract did not say anything about appraisals in this section, and it actually gave them a reason to cancel if the appraisal valuation came in after the loan approval timeline. This one does not. It specifically says the appraisal must be done and received by the lender and be at a term that meets their terms, or at a value that meets their terms sufficient for loan approval. Has to be done within the loan approval timeline. So make sure those are done. We had the agent on the other side. Look, we're a single agent for the seller. I'm not going to tell you, you got to get that done and you can cancel on me because it wasn't done or extend it. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm a single agent for the seller. I can put your buyer's interest to a detriment and put my seller's interest above all else. And I'm going to sit and wait. And then when day 30 comes around at the end of the day and you do not provide that, then we're going to come here to this section, line 120 to 125. Day 31 comes. Now your seller has all the power. If buyer fails to timely deliver any written notice provided for in this paragraph, the seller expiration of loan approval, then buyer shall proceed forward with this contract as though paragraph 8B had been checked. Seller may elect to terminate this contract by delivering written notice of termination to buyer within 3 days after expiration of loan approval period. And provided buyer is not in default under other terms of this contract, buyer shall be refunded their deposit. So I have a choice at that point. I can sit and lay in the grass and wait and say, I've got a better offer. I'm going to cancel you on day 31 because you did not provide loan approval. You did not waive your loan approval by day 31. So I'm going to cancel it. I'm going to cancel you and I'm going to give you your money back and take this better offer. You don't want to be that buyer's agent who just lost a contract for their buyer. So pay attention to your timelines. Make sure that by that date, you either provide loan approval or you provide a waiver of the loan approval financing contingency, or you cancel this contract, but the buyer needs to know what their options are. So make sure that you're paying attention to those timelines. And as a listing agent, you have that ability to do that day 31, 32, or 33, but you do have to return the buyer's escrow deposit if you cancel them within that 3-day period. Unless FHA or VA addendum. Well, let's talk about that. Let's pull that one up because that's another. We're seeing a lot more FHA offers. Kickout play is in kickout clause is in play if you have other offers when representing the seller. Kickout clause is in play if it's signed at the time of your contract. So if you have a kickout clause addendum that that's been added, then yes, it's in play. You can use it. If it's not been added, you don't have the ability to kick them out. So you need to make sure that if you're accepting something with a lot of contingencies, you have a kickout clause that you can use, which we're seeing more contingencies. So it should be more prevalent. So one of the things I did was, since we're seeing more FHA and VA financing, I just wanted to cover FHA VA addendum, talk about this a little bit. So we don't need definitions, but inspections and appraisals. In addition to the requirements of this contract, seller shall comply with applicable FHA and VA regulations regarding lender required inspections and appraisal repairs, collectively appraisal repairs. The cost to the seller for appraisal repairs shall not exceed this dollar amount, which cost is in addition to the cost required to be paid in any other provision. So many times a buyer's agent comes in, does an inspection, has a FHA contract, has $1,000 written in here. The inspection shows a few things. Hey, so, you know, you got $1,000 on the FHA addendum. Why don't you just fix these couple things that are over here? No, sorry, it's an as-is contract. We're not going to fix those things. You can agree to, but this is in addition to the other stuff that's in the contract. So I don't have to fix the stuff in the contract because it's as is, but I may have to fix something if the FHA appraiser says there's issues. So sorry, Mr. Buyer, your inspector is not the FHA appraiser. If the FHA appraiser marks it subject to that repair or inspection, I will be happy to do it because I'm obligated to do it under this contract, but we're not making those repairs prior to. Something to think about though, you may want to consider doing those repairs because if they are something the appraiser might catch, it might be a good idea to do it at this time so that we don't run into any other snags or delays with the appraiser noting it, wanting it fixed, having to do it a certain way, then having to come back out and re-inspect it. So it's usually a good idea sometimes to address something that might be an FHA concern. So let's talk about the FHA financing guidelines here. It is expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provision of this contract, the purchaser shall not be obligated to complete the purchase of the property described herein or to incur any penalty or forfeiture of earnest money deposits or otherwise unless the purchaser has been given in accordance with HUD, FHA, or VA requirements, a written statement by the Federal Housing Commissioner, Veterans Administration, or direct endorsement lender, setting forth the appraised value of the property, if not less than purchase price, dollar amount. What does that mean? It means this right here, notwithstanding any other provision, regardless, notwithstanding means regardless. It is expressly agreed that regardless of any other provision of the contract, if the appraisal is not this amount, or if it's less than this amount, then we have an issue. The purchaser shall have the privilege and option of proceeding with the consummation of this contract without regard to the amount of the appraised valuation. So for FHA, it says regardless of what the financing contingency says here about needing the appraisal by loan approval timeline and valuation, regardless of whatever else this says about it, I would, to be safe, get your appraisal in within your loan approval timeline, because if you have a seller, your seller might fight that and say, well, it says on that part that they have to have it done within this timeline. But it says here, regardless of any other provision of the contract, the purchaser shall not be obligated to complete this. And they will have the privilege and option of proceeding if they wanted to, or the ability to cancel. So this protects your FHA and your VA buyers. If it's VA, it's expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provision of this contract, the purchaser shall not incur any penalty. What this is known as the VA clause here is the escape clause. It's a VA escape clause. And the form actually says VA escape clause. Some people get a little freaked out about it. So you're going to sign this addendum at the time of contract. Your buyer will sign it, your seller will sign it at the time of contract. What happens though is a lot of lenders require their form to be signed. So a lender will send to the buyer's agent and say, hey, I need this signed by the buyer and the seller. It's the same exact verbiage that's right here under the VA financing checkbox. Same exact verbiage that's down here, same exact verbiage. Yet it says VA escape clause. And if you give that to a seller and the seller sees escape clause, what are they trying to do? Is the buyer trying to cancel? Why would they cancel? I'm not signing that. It says they're going to be able to cancel. Mr. Seller, we've already signed this. I've expressed that to you when we accepted the contract, that the VA gives the borrower this protection that they have the ability to have their financing, get an appraisal. And if the appraisal is not at the value, regardless of whatever else this contract says, the borrower has all of the protection and can decide what they would like to do. So that's one thing. And then this clause up here for FHA is called the FHA amendatory clause. So if you get something from a lender that says the FHA amendatory clause or the VA escape clause, even if you already have this addendum signed, a lot of lenders want it done on that specific form, the FHA amendatory clause and the VA escape clause. It's redundant. It's the same thing, same verbiage, same terms, same protections. Lenders will ask for it when you're in contract or getting, even sometimes they ask for it when they're getting through to their final underwriting. So it's that far in the contract asking for an escape clause that freaks a seller out. So just be aware that that's what that is. Fees and prepayments, purchaser shall pay all loan expenses except the seller shall pay up to, it's $100 if left blank, just leave it at blank really. This says exactly what's supposed to happen with the appraisal repairs. Tells you the timeline. If the cost of appraisal exceeds the limit, seller must within 3 days after receiving a notice, tell the purchaser written notice of their intention to pay some, all, or none of the excess. If seller pays the full amount, the purchaser may elect to pay the balance. Or if he pays less than the full amount, the purchaser can pay the balance or cancel. It says exactly that. VA has another prepayment section here as well. Talks about fees that the seller would pay. Appraisal repairs, same exact thing. If it exceeds that, talks about the timelines. And then down here, number 5, election to proceed with the contract. This is for both FHA and VA. In the event the purchaser elects under paragraph 3 or 4 above to proceed with this contract without regard to the amount of reasonable value established by the Federal Housing Commissioner, blah, 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 such election must be made within 3 days after purchaser receives the appraisal. This says, regardless of whatever else the contract says, the buyer is protected and can do whatever they want, move forward, cancel, get their money back, whatever they want. This says they have to do it within 3 days of receiving the appraisal. You can't sit on it and then say, well, I'll tell you what the value is, but I need to make a decision. I need some time, and then take a week and then cancel. 3 days, you have to deliver them written notice. Oh, what was the other one? CFPB clarification. If 3 days is needed, why does the contract say 7 days? Okay, so we have more verbiage in the contract that says this. Extension of closing date. There's the CFPB. There's Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure delivery requirements. We know that as TRID, or our CD, closing disclosure, needs to be done 3 days prior to closing. Needs to be done 3 days prior to closing. Required to be done 3 days prior to closing. This says, in the event closing funds from buyer's lender are not available on the closing date due to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure requirement, and box B is checked, loan approval has been obtained, lender's underwriting is complete, then the closing date shall be extended for such a period necessary to satisfy the CFPB requirements, provided such the period does not exceed 7 days. What is the CFPB requirement? 3 days. That's their requirement. The borrower must be notified 3 days prior to closing. They must be given a CD, must acknowledge that CD in writing with a dollar amount on it, interest rate, terms, escrow, principal and interest, all of that on there, all of their disclosures on there, fully disclosed. This is what you're going to bring to closing. This is your closing cost. This is your cash to close. This is your interest rate. This is your principal and interest. This is your HOA. This is your full payment. All of that has to be given to them 3 days prior to closing. If the CD has not been given 3 days prior to closing, say we're closing on, let's say today's Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday closing, 3 days prior to closing. Some lenders will allow you to close on day 3. They'll count today as one. So Monday, if today was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you could close Thursday. But let's say today's Monday and we're closing Friday. We get the CD or we don't get the CD on Monday. Tuesday comes. Buyer's agent calls and says, hey, did the buyer get the CD yesterday so we can close on time? You say, no, he didn't get the CD. Well, but we have an automatic extension of up to 7 days to make sure we get it in time. Huh. But the listing agent comes to you and says, well, loan approval has not been obtained. So no, that does not come into play because it says right here, we will do the extension if loan approval has been obtained, lender's underwriting is complete, and paragraph 8B is checked for financing, it will extend for up to 7 days. So all of those things have to be completed and done, and the borrower acknowledges a CD to have that extension put into place. So why does it say 7 days? Because a borrower can sign a CD. If today was Monday, we're supposed to close Friday. A borrower can sign a CD or not sign a CD Monday, then closing's supposed to be Friday. Loan approval is obtained, underwriting and everything is done. We're working through this. We're trying to get to the closing. The day before closing, the borrower can sign a CD. Well, we have a 3-day wait. Closing's tomorrow. Sorry, 3-day wait. Lender's underwriting has been approved. Loan approval has been obtained. 8B was checked. We have an automatic 3-day extension. It says it shall be extended. Everything's done. Borrower signed their CD. Here's the proof. Good. So we'll extend for 3 days. Say we get to day 1, day 2, we get to day 3. We're supposed to go to closing. The lender finds something else and says, oh crap, we have a problem. This changed. Insurance wasn't valid. Couldn't verify it. Underwriting didn't approve it. We have a new policy in place, but it raises the payment, raises the closing costs, changes this, changes that. Since the payment went up or the closing costs went up and cash to close went up, we must redisclose to the borrower. I'm supposed to close today. This says it's up to 7 days. So now you get another 3 days as long as it doesn't go past the 7. So that's why it says that, because those things happen. The lender must redisclose to a borrower if those fees change and go up. If they go down and the borrower brings less, that's not a problem. But if they go up and the borrower has to bring more, the borrower has to be redisclosed and have 3 more days to review everything per the CFPB requirements. It is not something the borrower can waive. It is not anything the lender can waive. That's why those terms are there. If anything does change, it has to be redisclosed. So that's where the CFPB comes in. John, I hope that helps answer the question, especially for why there's 7 days instead of 3, because they have to give room for a potential redisclosure if by chance something happens. Loan approval deadline, since we're talking about those, what should you do as a borrower? Deliver loan approval in writing. All it says is the buyer will deliver loan approval. It doesn't have to be written loan approval from the lender. The buyer will deliver loan approval. So deliver written notice of loan approval. Tell them that you are waiving the financing contingency if you don't have it yet and you're comfortable moving forward, or cancel the contract. Just pay attention to your dates. Use your critical date timeline. Put those things into your phone with reminders the day before. Should we write in interest rates on our loan approval, on our financing contingency? Because you have the option, its contract is contingent upon, within a period of time, obtaining this type of loan at a fixed or adjustable rate, not to exceed what percentage. Should we write in interest rates? If you have a borrower who's really tight, because our interest rates fluctuating right now, are they going down? Are they going up? Are they staying the same? What's your crystal ball say? I don't know. Could they go up? Yes, 100%. Could they go down? Yes, 100%. What's it going to happen? What's it going to do? I don't know. If you have a borrower that's really tight, and you want to make sure they have added protection, put an interest rate in there. Hey, I can do this, but it can't go over that. I'm just letting you know. Even if you don't put the interest rate in there and things change and your borrower doesn't get their loan approval, they're still protected because they were unable to obtain loan approval within the timeline provided, regardless of whether it was their financing, their qualifications, or the interest rate change and knock them out. But it is something that you can put in to show some protection. And lastly, for today, backup offers. What is a backup contract? A backup contract is a fully executed. That's the one thing most people miss. I've said this so many times. Hey, would you be willing to take a backup? I know you didn't take my buyer's offer and you told me we were second. You said we were second or third, and second and third were real tight. Everything was real close. Would you be willing to accept my buyer's offer as a backup offer? I'm going to send you over the documentation. Yeah, we'll hold it as a backup. No. I don't want you to hold my offer as a backup. I want you to take it as a backup offer. And in order to do that, you have to do two things. You have to come here to W, backup contract. Under page 11, section 19, you must have checked the box for W, backup contract. Have your buyer initial every single page, initial the backup addendum, backup contract addendum, send the entire contract signed by the buyer over to the seller's agent and ask them to execute the contract. I need you to put this in front of your seller and get this signed by them and then get it back to me, and we will have a fully executed backup contract. This gives your buyer leverage. It gives the seller leverage. It gives everybody leverage. The buyer's leverage is I got a backup offer at the price that I wanted to, and they can't go back on market. If this contract cancels, I'm in first position. No questions. They can't cancel me. I'm in first position. The buyer's not put to a detriment because the backup addendum says the buyer can cancel at any time during that period of waiting. He can cancel it. And if you have an as-is contract, even if you get notified that you're in first position now because the other one canceled, you have an as-is contract where your buyer can still cancel during the inspection period. There's no risk to the buyer. The backup contract also says the effective date shall be the date that the buyer is notified of the cancellation, the date the seller notifies the buyer that that first contract canceled. That becomes our effective date. So I don't even have to deliver escrow until you tell me that you canceled that contract. I have to do nothing. It does not hurt the buyer whatsoever, no risk. Seller, what's it do for the seller? It gives the seller some leverage. Buyer starts jerking around with inspections, with financing, screwing around, doing all this stuff. Hey man, look, no, I'm not going to do it. You either buy it at the terms we agreed to or not. I got a backup offer waiting for it, and I'd rather have that one. So you tell me what you want to do. It creates leverage. It creates an opportunity. So the backup contract is subject to the termination of a prior executed contract between seller and a third party. If the executed contract is terminated and seller delivers written notice of termination to the buyer on or before this date, this contingency shall be removed and a backup contract shall move into first position. The effective date of this backup shall be the date seller delivers written notice of termination of prior executed contract. Buyer may terminate this backup contract by delivering written notice to seller prior to that date. Really simple. But in order to have a backup contract, an official backup contract, it must be fully executed. Contract signed, backup contract checked, backup contract completely filled out. And what date should you put in there? Whatever date your buyer wants. Make it the closing date of the other contract. Hey, Mr. Agent, when are you guys supposed to close? I'm going to send you that backup, and I just want to know when to have this one expire. That's it. Really simple. Time's up. You guys have an awesome Wednesday. Happy March 1st. If you need anything, we're always available. Please check out some of the emails that you've been receiving with different YouTube videos that have been out. Share them as you please or recreate them on your own. You got great content for you. You guys have an awesome day. Thank you.